The Miracle on the Hudson, U.S. Airways Flight 1549 emergency landing on the Hudson River. It was a cold, gray morning on January 15, 2009, as the flight took off from LaGuardia Airport in New York City. The city below was still asleep, oblivious to the fact that in just a few minutes, it would bear witness to one of the most miraculous events in modern aviation history. But right now, in the confines of Flight 1549, everything seemed ordinary. The passengers buckled their seatbelts. The crew went through their usual motions, and the plane ascended into the sky. However, that feeling of safety and normalcy shattered in an instant. Suddenly, a violent jolt, then an alarming silence. The aircraft, a sleek Airbus A320, had just hit a flock of Canadian geese. Birds, thousands of them, struck the plane's engines, and within seconds, both engines had failed. The control tower could hear the panic in the voice of Captain Sully Sullenberger when he radioed in. "We've lost both engines. We're returning to LaGuardia." But Sully's calm voice was a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding in the cockpit. The plane had lost altitude rapidly, and the crew was quickly running out of options. Sully's co-pilot, Jeff Skiles, was desperately trying to restart the engines, but the systems were dead. The plane was gliding, but only for so long. A terrifying thought hit both pilots. They were not going to make it back to an airport. Their only option now was to land. The New York skyline stretched out below them, and the Hudson River loomed ahead, a narrow ribbon of water cutting through the city. If they didn't make a decision in seconds, there would be no chance for survival. This was no longer just a flight, but a life-or-death mission. The crew, despite the weight of the situation, remained incredibly calm. Sully and Skiles communicated, their training kicking in like an instinct. With a mind razor-sharp, Sully made the decision. There was no time for hesitation, no time for second-guessing. The Hudson was their only option. "Brace for impact," Sully said to the passengers, his voice controlled but firm. They had moments, just moments, before they would crash into the icy waters of the river. In the seats, passengers began to whisper prayers, clutching their loved ones, eyes wide in disbelief. The thought that they might not survive this was overwhelming. A few seconds before the plane would hit the water, the entire cabin was frozen in fear. Outside, New Yorkers were going about their day, unaware that a massive emergency was unfolding right above their heads. The Airbus banked sharply to the left, aiming toward the river. And in a stunning moment of piloting genius, Sully kept the plane level as it descended toward the water. The wings skimmed the river's surface, and the fuselage slammed into the cold, dark water with an enormous impact. The force of the landing was terrifying, but incredibly, the plane remained intact. The passengers, stunned but alive, slowly began to realize they were still breathing. Sully and Skiles had performed what seemed impossible. They had not just avoided a crash. They had brought their plane to a safe stop, despite every obstacle. It was a miracle, yes, but it was also sheer professionalism under pressure, an extraordinary combination of experience and skill. In those first few moments after impact, the plane began to fill with water. The passengers, many of whom had never faced a life-threatening situation before, scrambled to get to the exits. Some were shaken, others in complete disbelief. But Sully, calm as ever, led the crew in evacuating the aircraft. They guided the passengers toward the emergency exits, ensuring no one was left behind. Many were helped onto life rafts by emergency personnel who had arrived in minutes, and the entire event unfolded like a surreal dream. At that moment, the world had no idea that it had just witnessed a miracle. But when the news broke and the footage of the plane floating calmly on the Hudson River was broadcast across the globe, the heroics of Captain Sully Sullenberger became undeniable. All 155 people aboard survived. Every single one. The weight of what had just happened was hard to comprehend. The rescue teams, the bystanders who watched from the shore, and the countless others who were glued to their televisions understood one thing. They had just witnessed not just a landing, but a true act of heroism. In the weeks that followed, Sully was hailed as a national hero. But in interviews, he was humble. "I was just doing my job," he said repeatedly. "I did what I had trained to do, and I had a crew that worked together to get us through it." The emotional impact of that day, however, was felt by everyone. The survivors could never forget the moment their lives had hung in the balance. Some of them later spoke about the sense of time slowing down as the plane came closer and closer to the water. Others spoke about the sense of peace they felt in the final moments, as if they had already made peace with the possibility of death. But they didn't die. They were all alive. The airplane became a symbol of human resilience. The flight, now known as the Miracle on the Hudson, has since been studied in aviation schools around the world as an example of extraordinary skill and poise under pressure. Sully, however, remained humble. It wasn't the fame that changed him. It was a reminder that in the darkest of moments, humanity has the power to survive. That no matter how bleak a situation may seem, with skill, teamwork, and a little bit of luck, anything is possible. And so, when people asked him about that day, about the moment when the impossible became possible, he answered simply, "We're all alive because we work together." That's what made the difference. The suspense of those minutes in the air, the quick decisions, the terrifying descent, and the subsequent miracle still send shivers down the spine of anyone who hears the story. It is a reminder that in life, sometimes the most extraordinary moments come from the most impossible odds.